Today we will talk about your comic script. I did an interesting poll on Twitter and I asked people how they scripted their comic. And you can see it on the screen over here. I had 4 options. Obviously, those are not the only ways you can script your comic. These are the most common ways that I see people script their comics. So the options are official comic script format, bullet points, write it as a novel and then go from there, or not having a script at all and immediately diving in with your thumbnails. I should have added an other please specify option. A lot of them just used a mashup of all of these options. I've actually used all of these methods just to check them out. There were a few that I did for a long time and then I switched it up. So I'm going to talk about all of these in this video. Welcome back to Pencils and Stories. My name is Henrike and I make and teach comics. If you want to make your own comics as well, then subscribe to this channel for weekly videos. Okay, so I want to start off this video by saying that whatever works for you is the best way for you. There is no right or wrong way to script unless you work for a publisher. Or unless you have a collaboration, maybe with a writer or an artist, and you want to make sure that everything is clear from the get-go so you don't have to explain everything. If you're the writing party of any comic endeavor, then you actually might want to have a good talk with your artist and have a conversation about how they want the script to be. The official script option, there is actual formats that publishers use that you need to work with when you do a script for an official publisher. Whenever you make your own comic, you make a webcomic or you make your own physical comics to sell, it doesn't really matter as long as it's clear to you. But still, a lot of people find a lot of value in using an official script, and it might actually look a little bit more like a movie script. People really like this just because they're used to having this really clear overview. It really helps some people to get into a mindset of describing what they want to show visually. So that can be a really great way. So unless you're collaborating or you're working for an official publisher, you don't necessarily need an official script just because that is how the pros do it. You make your own thing. So the way I used to script my comics for a long time was actually by writing it out as a novel. This is because from an early age, I wrote and I always wanted to be an author, like a book author. So that was kind of like the way that I processed story, was by going in and writing it out like a novel. The pitfall that I want to talk about and that I want to warn you about is that when you write in novel form, it's very easy to go into the head of your character. That is good because it helps you flesh out your character's motivations and their thoughts and emotions. The difference between a novel and a comic, though, is that a novel can really dive into the inner life of a character, the things they're thinking, what they're feeling, the things they're processing inside. Technically, you can have thought balloons, so you can show the thoughts of a character, but, you know, it's better to show things visually, show it in the character's actions, in their dialogue, in the way they are acting. So it's better to be a little bit more concerned with what the character is conveying to the outside world, because that is what your reader is going to see. Also be aware of writing things like "it smelled like sewer." You know, you cannot really show a smell in a comic. You could, but that usually it can turn kind of cartoony, or you will have to have a character, you know, pinch their nose and go, "Oh, it smells terrible in here." But then again, that's an external thing. So it's better to write character X hold their hand to their nose and said, "Oh, it smelled terrible," then, "Oh, it smelled like sewer," and it made everybody a little nauseous. You could do that, but that's harder to execute in your comic. So always be aware when you write in novel form, because, you know, it takes a lot of time. That's also one of the reasons that I stopped using that method, because it takes a long time to write something good. And I now use just bullet points. And that's super fast. It's like, I want this and this and this and this to happen. The character is doing this and this and this. They're there and there and there. And then have dialogue. For me, that's very fast. But I do know that writing it as a novel can help you really get into the headspace of the characters and really flesh out the underlying motivations and, you know, things like atmosphere and stuff. So if writing it as a novel really helps to visualize it in your head and make it tangible for you, then go ahead. I feel like having my bullet points and then going into thumbnailing, the thumbnailing is actually what does that for me. It makes it visual. I have to start thinking about atmosphere. I have to start thinking about locations and all of that stuff. So that's how I kind of combine it now. But if it works for you, by all means, go for it. Then we come to my favorite method at this point, because I change up my process all the time. But right now it's bullet points. And like I said, what I really like about using bullet points is that it's quick, it's easy, and you have all the necessary info, and it's really easy to edit. So I will have my entire story in bullet points. It's just a general overview of what's going to happen in my story. Then I go into scenes. I have bullet points for my scenes, and those I divide into pages. So I just literally, I take my entire bullet point list of one scene, and I just make lines where I think the page breaks are the most natural. And then you could even go further and for every single page make one bullet point for every single panel you're going to use with the dialogue. It doesn't really matter how you use, point by point writing, but it's really helpful in terms of editing as well, because you can kind of see like, oh, I have a little bit too many panels for this page and I really want to keep this on one page, so I need to scrap things and then make a new bullet point list, which is really fast. So I really like the bullet point method. It's very fast. And then there's people who don't actually use a script. They will just write out the dialogue that they need. They kind of have it in their head. They're thinking about it. They write down dialogue. It's also very good to maybe start out a page with dropping dialogue on it and then having some kind of nice flow on the page so that it's very easy to read, and then dive in with the images, and that makes sure that your pages will just naturally be created instead of having a page and cramping all the dialogue that you want on there. So that's a method that I recently tried out and I really liked it, because it will ensure that you have enough space for your balloons and your dialogue and still have enough space for your drawings as well. So some people work in dialogue only, and that's also valid if that works for you. Some people might want to think about it a little bit more before they dive into the drawing of like what's actually going to happen, what's the information that I need to convey, so they might use bullet points. And some people really want to dive into the story deeply before starting drawing, because writing is still faster than drawing is. If that makes your drawing process faster, if writing everything out beforehand just makes you fly through the drawings, then that obviously is a very good method as well. There's also another method that I used for quite some time. I actually liked to script in thumbnails for a while. And by that, I mean that I would draw my story out in very simple stick figures, just so I could get a feel of visually of where the characters were, who they were talking to, and stuff like that. And then I would do this in post-it notes. I would just draw post-it notes, so I got a feel of the pacing and the panels, and that way I could also like switch them around and see what the better flow of the story was. It was all about pacing. It wasn't about composition. It was about acting. The panels would 100% change, but it was my first visual idea on a post-it note for every single panel, and then being able to refine the panels and dive in a little deeper later with what kind of camera angle I needed. And then I would take those and make a final page thumbnail out of that, which went really fast, and then I would use that thumbnail to draw over. I sometimes still do it for scenes where I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this visually and I just want to see it real fast. So I grab a stack of post-it notes and I just sketch out what I'm seeing in my head real fast, and then I go switch them around, and that's a way that I can kind of figure out how I want the story to flow and how I want the pacing to be before I start actual thumbnailing. So those are a few methods that you can use to script your comic. As always, do what works for you. Try and set yourself up for successful thumbnailing so that you don't have to think about story stuff when you're thumbnailing, because the thumbnailing process is actually meant to focus on communicating the story visually. So it might be good to have at least a clear idea, at least in your head, of how your scene is going to play out, so you can, in the thumbnailing process, focus only on composition, clear communication, and good flow of the balloons and stuff on your page. Because let's face it, thumbnailing is complicated enough as it is. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you want more comic tips, go to pencilsandstories.com. You can also sign up for my weekly bonus content by going to pencilsandstories.com/extra. And if you subscribe, you will receive my welcome gift. That is my quick comic tips PDF. And that wraps up this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up so I know to make these kinds of videos for you. And for now, go out and make some comics.